Hi, I'm Amy McDonald, Director of City Space, and I look forward to inviting all of you for this conversation between the New York Times bestselling authors Tomi Adeyemi and Angie Thomas. The energy and the spirit between them is so delightful, and I'm so looking forward to this hour. I also look forward to a time when we will all be able to gather together in person. If you'd like to buy any of their books, just look below in the text to our wonderful independent bookstore, Brookline Booksmith, will be handling the sales of the books. And we'll also be taking your questions throughout the hour. Just go to slido.com and type in #TellMeMore. With no further ado, I'd love to hand it over to our moderator this evening, the co-host of our national NPR show, Here and Now, Tonya Mosley.
Thank you, Amy. I am really excited for tonight because, it's been said that Tomi Adeyemi and Angie Thomas are rewriting the rules of young adult fiction. And that is true. It is also true that as a genre, young adult literature is still fairly young. Its modern iteration has only been around since the 1960s. And over the last few years, we're seeing more young Black writers writing about the totality of their lives through fiction, bringing forth a fuller picture of their existence in ways that help all readers understand the worlds around them. Angie Thomas's huge success happened in 2017 when her debut novel, The Hate U Give, which was a bestseller for months and became a major motion picture, came out and everyone was talking about it. Angie followed that up with the novels On the Come Up and Concrete Rose, and she's also contributed to the short story collection Blackout. Tomi Adeyemi also topped the bestseller list with her 2018 novel Children of Blood and Bone, which is the first book in her Legend of Orisha series. The second book, Children of Virtue and Vengeance, came out in 2019. And by the way, Tomi also made headlines for signing one of the biggest book deals in history for a young adult author. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Tanya. Thank you for that introduction.
And you two are friends, right? So this is like one big girls' night. That's how we should approach this night.
So I remember getting that message. I'm not sure where along the journey it was, but I just remember and just feeling like both motivated and touched and just like, okay, we're doing this, we're trying. And I think maybe the third grade thing is because we're blazing new territory and trying new things. And yeah, it's helpful. It's really helpful to get to connect and be able to just share and get guidance.
I know. Somebody needs to write a screenplay on how many friendships have started from sliding into those DMs. There's some amazing art that has happened through that process, and friendships, as you all illustrate. I think congrats are in order, Tomi. You were just inducted into your high school's Hall of Fame a few weeks ago.
Thank you.
How did it feel? Great and surreal and all the things. We all wanted that, right?
Yeah, no, it was very, I moved in 7th grade. I moved from a diverse neighborhood to a predominantly white neighborhood. So it wasn't until going back home that I was like, oh no, this is really your home. This is where you grew up. These were your formative years, the good and the bad. And it was honestly,
Remind us where that was.
Oh yeah, that was in Hinsdale, Illinois. So it's a suburb like 30, 40 minutes out of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
But just, getting to be in the school and see my teachers again, and even students. Angie, I don't know if you've gotten to interact with readers recently, but just seeing the people that we create for again after this long gap was very like, I don't know what this is. Is this filling my cup or filling my heart or something? It was very like grounding and just reminding us why we do what we do. I think we write alone and we've been extra separated. And so, it was an honor, but it was also just such okay, you were really sitting in this class and now you're really doing these books and like trying to make these movies, and okay, let's just keep going because we never thought it was going to go this far. So who's to say what the limit is?
And also in such a short amount of time. And I'm also thinking, especially since your parents wanted you to be something else, like a doctor or a lawyer, right? I mean, I'm just really curious for both of you. What was it about putting pen to paper that made you feel brave enough to set your own path when the adults around you really had these other paths that they wanted you to take to get success? And Tomi,
you go first.
Whatever.
I was like looking at that. I was like, Angie, I want to hear, because obviously we get these questions, but I actually want to know like so yeah, I'm throwing it to you. Like, where was it, bravery, or where did it really come from? Now that you're 3 books down the line, it's funny you said a couple months on the bestseller. I'm like years on the bestsellers. So now years, magnificent years on the freaking New York Times bestsellers list, 3 books down, movies. Like, we're going back to really the beginning. Where was that for you, and what really started this?
Yeah, for me, I've been it's been interesting. My mom has always been like a cheerleader no matter what. So like when I was like about 16, 17, well, no, from 13 until 17, I wanted to be a rapper and I wasn't good at it. But my mom was like, let's do this then, baby. I will be manager. I will call the radio stations, whatever. And then I got to college and I was like, I think I want to leave the rap thing alone. I want to study writing. I want to study creative writing and figure out what kind of writing I want to do. And I went to like a mostly white school, and I was the only Black student in the creative writing program. I was the first Black student to graduate from the creative writing program, actually. And so, like, I had a lot of experiences there that really, I found myself being silent, probably at times where I shouldn't have been. And writing became my outlet. And so I would write stuff and I would share it with like maybe my Black friends. And they're like, oh, snap, I feel like this too. And I'm like, oh, it's not just me. No, it's not just you. And so I would write the stuff and it would help me. And so once I got out of college, I was like, I think I want to pursue this book writing thing. I mean, I thought about screenwriting. I thought about being a poet, like at slam poetry. Nothing against slam poetry, but I'm just like, that's not me. Like, I just couldn't pull it off. So, I told my mom, I was like, I think I want to pursue writing books. And she's like, all right, let's do this. And so I was like, but the thing was, like, I was looking at young adult literature, and there weren't a lot of people that looked like us writing books, and they definitely weren't the main characters in those books. So it wasn't so much bravery. I think at the time it was just being fed up with not seeing people like me in a position like that, and realizing that the reason I turned to hip hop was because I didn't think a lot of people like me wrote books, especially books for young people, for teenagers. So I saw us rapping, but then realizing, what, as an adult later, what, I'm just going to have the audacity to write these books about young people who look like me in neighborhoods like mine. And if I just have to sell them at the back of my trunk on the corner, then that's what I'm going to do. That's what I thought I was going to have to do with Hate Together. Like, imagine me standing on the corner like, hey, I got this book,
Right. I mean, Tomi, that I love that. Thank you for turning that around, that word bravery, from bravery to audacity. Did it feel that way for you, Tomi? Because you create these amazing characters. I mean, that like Angie, people see themselves in those characters. So having the audacity to write your truth.
I think there is I would say twofold. If I go completely inner world, I had an experience this year with my health where I couldn't write, and it was painfully clear what writing is for me and what it's always been for me, which is just my lifeboat. It can get confusing in the industry, and that when there's so many competing interests involved, and so many new voices and so many new pressures. But like the period I couldn't write, I felt like I was stuck on planet Earth. And I was like, is this what it's like to not write and I'm like, this sucks. I'm not. I'm like, no. So on the inner side, writing has always been this outlet for me, and this sort of companion through this really insane process of being alive. And yeah, so on one part, it really is just a part of me. On the external part of me, I would say there was an anger. I was a very angry, I finally feel like I can say I was a very angry young adult. Not necessarily as a teenager, but in my earlier 20s, just a lot of rage over what was happening in the world, over the headlines I was seeing, over just all the hashtags, it felt like the never ending barrage of police brutality, tragedies. I'm like, yeah, that's the right word. It's not cases, it's tragedies. It was just a never ending stream of that. But underneath the anger was just a lot of sorrow and a lot of fear. It's so much more fun to be angry than to be sad, for at least as long as you pretend you're just angry. And so there was just there was a fire to change things. There's a blog post I wrote after the South Carolina Bible study shooting. And if you read it, it does just feel like my angry, I'm going to write this thing and it's going to be so good. And you're going to, and for all those people who said you didn't like the Hunger Games because Rue was black, well, you're going to have to like this because it's so good and everyone's going to be black. And there was a lot of gusto, but really underneath it, there was a lot of pain. So on one hand, I was doing it because I had to do it. I have a friend, Romina Garber, who says, like, you have to write because you have to breathe and you have to eat. And I didn't think I was so artsy and sensitive. I've learned, unfortunately, that I am. So I had to. But on the other hand, yeah, there was this desire to change things. And for me, Angie like smacked the piñata open and was like, oh, whoa, we actually can change things. We actually can do this. Okay, let's like kick it into gear and keep going. And I feel like that's been happening. So I do hope that's what writers see whenever they see someone they admire, they see someone breaking new ground. Like, it should just look like one more wall has been knocked down and we can keep going and keep going and keep going. Because I even see that with Amanda Gorman. I'm like, yes, that's a huge, huge wall. So I'm like, who knows? I don't know. I can't even imagine what it's going to be, but it feels like we just keep building and breaking new ground. And the sky's the limit, but it's like sort of up to us to reach the moon and the stars for all that to happen.
I want to break this down with you more, the breaking down of walls, because the late young adult writer Walter Dean Myers wrote this New York Times op-ed shortly before his death about the lack of representation within the YA genre. And he said this quote that people always quote: "Book transmit values. They explore our common humanity. What is the message when some children are not represented in those books?" Angie, how have you reconciled the reality that you two are part of a renaissance in a way? Yes, you're writing books that speak to today, but you're also part of a long tradition of Black writers who really understood that true liberation comes in the form of having access to thoughts. So you're in this new evolution of that, of being able to provide access to thoughts.
I just got chills.
So yes, you're both. I want you to speak on this. Whoever wants to speak on it.
Yeah, no, I think about that article a lot. I would not be where I am if it were not for Walter Dean Myers. Like, let me clarify, because I was saying I wasn't getting a lot of those books as a teenager, but it's just because the gatekeepers weren't putting them in my hands. Those books were out there. Had I read Monster as a teenager, I would have thought, oh, snap, maybe books are for me. So the funny thing is, he wrote that op-ed and it spurred the We Need Diverse Books movement. And from there, the We Need Diverse Books movement and the organization gave me the grant that helped me to write my first novel, helped me buy the laptop to write The Hate You Give. So him doing that article knocked down a wall, so I'm so thankful. But it's twofold. On one hand, I know that the books that I write are mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, to quote Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. They're going to give some kids some mirrors, and that's important, but they're also going to give kids some sliding glass doors and some windows, and those are important as well. It's important for white kids to read about Black kids and read about the different kinds of lives of Black kids. But on the other hand, we have this whole idea that anything done by a Black author or a marginalized author has to be excellent, when we should be able to do a range of kinds of books. We shouldn't have to hit a certain level to be considered, to be able to get a seat at the table. I want to read all kinds of books.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but you're
Oh,
also
yeah.
dealing at the same time with this issue where school districts are trying to ban your work. They don't want kids to read it.
Yeah. Yeah. Last week was Banned Books Week. Banned Books Week. And The Hate You Give has been one of the top 10 most banned books since it came out. It's a badge of honor to me. But now we're seeing pushback even more so because people are hiding behind this whole idea of critical race theory. But really, a lot of times what they're saying is we don't want to read books that talk about things that make us uncomfortable. Like, for instance, it just came out that Jerry Craft's book, New Kid, was banned in Texas, in a school district in Texas, because there are scenes where the white kids say things like, "Oh, I want to touch your hair," to the black kid. And they're like, "That's going to make white children feel oppressed." No, that's going to show white kids you don't touch people's hair.
You said
Without
it's like a badge of honor. Can you say more on that?
Yeah. If you're getting banned, that means you've said something that made people uncomfortable, and true change comes from discomfort. So I'm glad to make people uncomfortable. I'm glad I write books that make them uncomfortable. I'm glad that I talk about things in The Hate You Give that they don't necessarily want to have discussions about at the kitchen table, because those are the very things they need to discuss at the kitchen table.
I want to remind the audience that you could put your questions in Slido. That is the deck that we're using. And with that, just do the hashtag Tell Me More, and we will be able to ask your questions of our excellent guests. I want to bring you in, Tomi, because I want you to be able to speak to this about essentially like this push and pull that you all are dealing with, this through line. I recently spoke with poet and lawyer Dwayne Reginald Betts, who is also one of this year's MacArthur Fellows. And he spent time in prison when he was 16 years old for carjacking. And he was talking about, what made him a Black poet was being able to read Black authors in prison. And he thought, what would my life have been like if I had read as a boy Syl Clifton or Etheridge Knight? And knowing the power of your work up against then these movements to not have your work be a part of the discourse in schools that need them so desperately. How do you reconcile that? And I just want your thoughts overall.
It's funny, a lot of times when I'm asked questions, I'm like, everything comes to me from a point of sanity, of maintaining sanity. And I don't even mean as like a public figure or an author. I really mean as a human being. I got very far on rage, and I got very far on anger, and essentially just trying to like force what I believe to be right, or trying to advocate so strongly. I think it was before the pandemic, but I just got to a point where I was like, I'm already tired. I'm not even through my 20s. I'm tired. I find I would much rather spend my time and my energy and my focus talking to people who are in the middle. And what I mean by that is, well, oh no, this wasn't on the call. We were just talking a bit about how life is short. But life is short, time is limited, our energy is limited. And I just think if there are 10 people here who want to ban your book, I usually find there are 50 to 60 people here who just have some questions and want to talk. Mm-hmm. And I would much rather be in the room with the 50 or 60 people who want to talk than screaming at the 10 people over here and being like, you have to let me in. I think kids are crafty. They're craftier now than they've ever been. And the other thing is, it's good advertisement. If you tell someone not to read something, that's the first book they're going to want to read. So I'm like, it's not so much the kids, it's not so much the adults. I think, or I don't worry about the kids. I am open to talking to the adults, but again, it's like we do write for young adults. We know what these books meant for us when we were growing up. We know what these books would have meant for us as adults now, because you're always kind of still writing for your inner child. And so I think it's it's more just about focusing on people who have the open minds and the open hearts. And that's literally all young adults are, is they're inquisitive, they're curious, they're empathetic, they're passionate. Yeah, that's really what makes it so beautiful. Again, this past homecoming honor weekend was my first chance in like 2 years to see readers. And it's like, on one hand, there's the homecoming queen. On the other hand, there's a girl from Namibia and like her 5-year-old sister. On the other hand, there are these really creative girls. And it's like, we're each having conversations about the same things. It's like, they want to connect with you. They want to know about chasing their dreams. They want inspiration and hope for what they can be in the world. I guess this is all to say there's so much dividing us right now. So much dividing us that it's incredibly exhausting. But stories are actually, to me, the one thing that unify us, especially when they're done right. We haven't gotten that so much recently, but it's like, because now fandoms are a place for incredible divides, but when stories are done right, they unify us. And when books are done right, they bring kids together. And so, yeah, that's just to say there's always opposition, but it's like I do as much as I can to engage as little as I can, because I'm like, that's not what it's about. And it also drives me insane. So.
Yeah, right. What a quick way to drive yourself insane. You said something powerful here, though, about words and books unifying us. And also, particularly with the YA genre, the ability, as you said, you put it so beautifully, like you're writing to your younger self. There is a movement of adults who are really into YA, and in part because it is a way to be able to go back and reflect. How does that feel, knowing that both of you're writing for young adults, but really you're writing for everyone?
For me, it's like, take that, YA critics.
Right, because there's a lot of criticism as well about the YA genre. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I love YA. I've always loved YA. I'm finally getting to the age where I'm appreciating adult fiction more as like a consumer. But I think why YA speaks to all of us is not just because it's so emotionally intense and usually more plot driven because it has to be. We're not separated from who we were growing up. That was one of the questions I asked my teacher. I was like, hey, I just want to know, is there a certain age where the lever switches and you completely feel like the adult version of yourself? And they're like, no, you just act like it and pay your taxes. So I think
that's a good teacher.
Yeah, it's a beautiful opportunity because you get to write the stories you want to write, cover all the things you want to cover, get to engage with such an incredibly passionate audience, but then also get to speak to adults. And just, yeah, I look at it as a blessing because the audience is wider and, you get to reach more people if you write something that connects with a broad audience.
Okay, let's get into your writing. And we have a couple of questions from our audience members as well. Tomi, your books are set in a fictional kingdom where magic was once practiced, but you also put in real life incidents of violence. Can you talk about how you use the fantasy format to talk about social problems?
Yeah, the fantasy format it's like a blank canvas in a sense, because you get to build an entirely new world. The benefits to it, it sounds so scientifical to say benefits. A lot of this really is just the art, like the artistic inspiration and what you get excited by and where you want to go. But if you step back and analyze it, if I bring you into a brand new world and you're learning the rules of this world, you're mesmerized by the magic and the giant lions and the adventure, and then you see an incident that mirrors police brutality, or you see an incident that mirrors abuses of power, it's in the context of the story. Your emotions are in the story. If I bring that into our real world, you have all of your biases. You have everything you've read on Facebook, everything your uncle said at Thanksgiving. There's all these competing interests and competing viewpoints, and it's incredibly divisive. And it's just so much easier, I find, in a fantasy setting to get people to focus just on the humanity of the actions, because my books are brutal and they are still nothing compared to reality. I'm like, reality is so much more brutal than anything I put in my fantasies. So yeah, there's a benefit. There's also a distance for me. I think about that a lot, with like Angie and Nick Stone of it. These stories are painful to write.
Yes.
And so for at least for me, I get to have some distance with the magic, with the adventure, with the romance. Just not having any of that and having to be in the pain of it and the pain of the situation and the pain of the reality of it. And it's a lot of pain, as you're hearing me saying, and that's difficult to manage. So yeah.
That's interesting. What do you say to that, Angie? I mean, this idea that what you write is based in realism, but it's also therapeutic, I would guess, to be able to express.
Oh yeah, it's a little of both. It's taxing emotionally, but it can be therapeutic. It can be a form of therapy. I remember like this past year, well, last year, 2020, I was working on Concrete Rose, my third novel, and that's a prequel to The Hate You Give, and it takes place in 1998 and 1999. And like, there's no coronavirus in 98, 99. There's no social media. Maverick has to use a freaking payphone and a beeper. Like, that's so nice. It was such a nice escape that I was like, oh my God, is this what writing a fantasy book is like? It was, even though it was dealing with real stuff, it wasn't dealing with the right now.
Right.
And to a degree. So it was nice, but at the same time, I'm thankful for being able to write like The Hate You Give and On the Come Up and deal with real life stuff that was happening right then, because it not only helped me, but it helped my readers to process things, and that's great. But I gotta admit, like, I needed a break. Like right now, I'm working on my fourth book, and it's a middle grade. The main character is 12, and it's a fantasy novel. So I'm like, I'm trying to get in her lane, like I'm trying to get that escape, because after the past year and a half,
right. That's your transition to the escape. You'll start writing about it, and then you'll escape yourself. I have some questions from the audience, and I want to get right to them. This question comes from someone listening. They say, I teach and share your books and love discussing with kids. How do I help parents when they're worried about their babies being exposed to big ideas? Would you like to take that one, Angie?
Sure. I would say, one, know that your babies can handle more than you think. A lot of times we don't necessarily consider that young people do know what's happening in the world. I had a young man reach out to me once, and he's like, I'm 10 years old and I read The Hate You Give. And at first my reaction is, oh, but he's like, but it helped me, and me and my mom had these discussions and stuff. I think the best thing a parent can do is make themselves available to these discussions with their kids. So if you're going to have these books about these big ideas, be willing to discuss these big ideas. Don't just leave it up to me and up to Tomi to talk about these things through our books with your child. You still got to do your part in it. So the books are just a gateway to it, And then too, I will say, I once had a white parent come up to me at an event, and she was like, I don't know if my 14-year-old is ready to read The Hate You Give. And I said, well, could you tell that to the Black parent who's having a conversation with their 9-year-old about what to do if they're stopped by a cop? And then she said, oh. So a lot of times when we're talking about these big ideas and these difficult conversations, we're not considering the parents or the people that are forced to have them. And we want to stay in our comfort, but you can't change unless you're a little uncomfortable. You can't raise young people who become empathetic adults, who become caring adults, unless you're going to have these uncomfortable conversations about real things that affect people beyond themselves, about issues beyond the things they're dealing with. So have the books about the big ideas, but also have the discussions about the big ideas.
Also, it's to what Angie said, it's a huge opportunity. I think that's one of the things parents say the most to me, of like, oh, I read this with my kid, and this is one of the first things we were able to really do together in a minute. I don't think the good thing about a book, it's still art. You can do that, or you can watch the 7 o'clock news and just see the barrage of names and see the barrage of faces. You can do that, or you could have your child watching what happened to George Floyd. It's basically, as Angie said, to this point, we're so interconnected. Your kids know way about the internet than you do. I don't look at it so much as like, oh, this is almost the safest way to engage. It's a fictional setting. There are discussion guides, and it can be something that's a memory. And that's one of the most precious things to me, when a parent comes up and they said, we did this together, we read this together, we enjoyed this together. Because I think it's hard, especially as your kids grow up, to find the things you can really do in tandem. So yeah, to see it more as an opportunity as opposed to a grenade.
Has the discourse slowed down or changed through the pandemic as folks have been able to slow down and take in more literature? I'm just curious, the feedback you get from the audience.
I don't know. I haven't seen the audience for 2 years.
And I mean that in the way of letters and emails and things like that. Just curious, because I have been hearing from a lot of parents who have been able to have those opportunities now that you speak of, because they have this one-on-one time with their children in ways they didn't have before. Yeah. I have another question for you, Angie. Someone asks, I know you said you weren't a good teen rapper, but I love the lyrics you wrote for Bree on the Come Up. Are you pumped to see the music come to life in film?
I am, but I will give you guys like a heads up, because with Hollywood and music rights and book rights and stuff, they're doing the songs with different lyrics. So they're not using my lyrics from the book. But I've heard the songs. They actually got one of my favorite rappers. Her name is Rhapsody. She's a legend in the game, and she's doing all of the raps for the movie. And so I've heard the songs. They've already had our Bree in and recording. In fact, while we're sitting here, I just got a text from the executive producer asking me a question, because we're starting to film in 2.5 weeks. And so I'm super excited. But no, my raps won't be in the movie, but the raps are so much better. You'll be glad.
What is that like what's that feeling like to see your words come to life in the form of these characters that are on screen?
It's wild. The most amazing feeling I've ever had was driving onto the set of The Hate U Give in Atlanta and being blocks away, and they were filming the scene of outside of Khalil's funeral where they're having the march. And I hear hundreds of extras chanting, "Justice for Khalil, justice for Khalil." And I had to pull my car over and I cried. I mean, with movies, when you're writing a book, it's just you sitting down at the computer. But then with the movie, it's hundreds of people coming together, people you may not even meet, and they're coming together to bring something to life that started in your head. That's an amazing feeling. And so I made it my business that every time I watch The Hate U Give, I sat and watched the credits, because I wanted to see every single name of every person that went into doing that. So it's awesome. I'm looking forward to it again. I'm excited. I got my dog. We're going to go on set. I got him a gold chain. We're going to be flossing on set.
You for real got him a gold chain?
I got him a gold. It looks like an old school gold chain, but it's a collar, and he's got like a diamond. It's not real diamonds, but it's diamond, and it's like a diamond K. And I have the matching leash. So he's gonna be balling. I'm gonna post pictures. Y'all gonna see.
You gotta. I want to ask you both something about social media. At a time when social media influencers are really heralded as what success can look like, both of you have achieved this astonishing success through through this deep reflection and contemplation that really only comes from the slowness of writing. Tomi, I want to know how you've been able to circumvent this world where basically clicks determine your worth. Is this something that you've ever had to grapple with?
I mean, I think social media is a lot. And again, I always come at this from the human standpoint. I know, like, I think like Facebook and Instagram were down yesterday, and like people were freaking out, and it's like, for me, I'm like, oh, well, let me not say it, but I'm like, if this is how it ends, I just think it's confusing. It's really confusing. It's even confusing when things are going well. It creates weird expectations. It's what do I share? What do I not share? Am I posting enough? It's just weird things that don't actually have to do with life or with creativity. So again, I don't know if it's circumvented. I think we're so plugged into social media and it's its own world at this point. But the real world is also a real world, which is a weird thing to have to say, but it's like, I don't know. There's times when I just take breaks and make sure that the only things that are in my head are actually the things that my five senses like can pick up, as opposed to knowing everything that's happening in the world, good or bad. It's just a lot of information. It's a lot of noise. It's obviously amazing to have that connectivity. But it's overwhelming. So I don't know if I've circumvented it as much as just failed at it and been like, peace. So
Right. Well, Angie, you actually take this on in on the come up. Your heroine Bree wants to be a hip hop star, and she goes viral with her first song, but a lot of the attention comes from people who misunderstand those words. Is this something that you've ever experienced?
Oh, absolutely. Like, if you want to be misunderstood, try to share a deep thought on Twitter. Like,
Right.
just go in there, try that, because everybody's going to read it in their own way, and they're going to bring their own experiences, their own hangups, their own issues, and they're going to bring that to it, and they're going to assume one thing when you may mean another. That's the unfortunate part about social media. And the other thing is, people get on there and they just say whatever they're thinking. And everything that you think doesn't need to be necessarily shared.
Mm.
And so I'm careful of how I use it. And I at one point I hated that I had to be careful. I was resentful that I had to be careful of how I use it. But now I'm glad that I've gotten to the point where I'm like, you know what? I don't have to share this on here. I don't have to say this on here. I can control this. This is one space where, I can at least start with some control, because if you say the wrong thing, you lose control of it. You lose control of the narrative. You lose control of what has been said, and everybody interprets it their own way. So I'm careful, and I'm okay with that. I think the downside of social media is making people feel as if they have to be right all the time. They have to be this, they have to be that. When the fact is, we're all learning, we're all growing, we're all going to be wrong at some point. And I don't have to get on here and say things just because they pop into my head. I can hold off on that. I can say it to my friends, I can text it to somebody. I don't have to get on there and say it. So it's a double-edged sword. It really is, because I've seen positivity of social media as well, as far as the Black Lives Matter movement and making us aware of people and incidents. But at the same time too, I've seen the negative side. So it's just about balance.
It's about balance. And what you said there was really powerful. It's about evolving, because we're all making mistakes and we're all evolving. And you all became friends from a Twitter DM. So there you go. There's also some other upsides to social media. Tomi, we got to see your recent Met Gala outfit.
Yes.
All of the documenting of it on Insta. What was that like? It's fire. I wish I could post a picture right now for folks.
Yes.
To see.
Thank you. Oh, it was a really, really cool experience. It was like the first thing I did since March 2020, when everything shut down. So it was a very like both overwhelming but calm Cinderella experience. I was joking with them. I was like, I don't feel like I need to get married now, because this is if I just wanted to put on a pretty dress, you've given me that. But it was beautiful. It was a really beautiful moment. And I just loved it wasn't just about getting dolled up. I think it was just catching a glimpse of myself in the mirror when everything was done and being like, oh, hello. Ma'am,
It's
it's
wonderful
nice to
that
see
moment.
you. It's nice,
Here,
yeah,
the
it's nice
moment.
to see you out.
Yes.
And I like it. I think authors are glamorous. You know, it's like we make these incredible world. We're chill. We like to be in our PJs, and we mostly just want to be with our dogs. And me personally, I just want to eat popcorn. But I think it's cool to step out into the world in big ways and just allow yourself to be celebrated, especially in this space, because it's difficult. I know we probably battle imposter syndrome with our books alone, which is really hard for people to understand because they're like, well, you've already done this, 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 and this. But then I learned Maya Angelou had imposter syndrome after like 11 books and several awards. So I'm like, okay, I think it's just us. But I love the idea that the things we do and the battles we face are inspiring the next generation, because we look to the generation before us and are inspired by things they've done or images. And like, you know, I posted the Whitney Houston in her fairy godmother Cinderella gold dress. And it's, you know, it's like I think she did uniquely understand the power of the images she was putting out there through that movie and the impact it was going to have on the girls of that time, but also for ages to come. It's like we really don't know. We still don't know. We still don't know what's going to happen with our lives, with our careers. And yeah, it's still, when you were like, how does it feel being a part of this renaissance? I was like, oh yeah, in a history book, they would like write these, holy crap. So I'm glad that there's some images to go along with that and make it seem like we knew exactly what was happening and exactly what we were doing, and we were doing it in style. I know I felt the same when I saw Angie's picture at the TIFF film festival, that that premiere of The Hate U Give. I think it was TIFF. You look like such a princess, and it's like we need that. We need that, not just as people, but also because we are usually getting the opposite images. We're usually getting only the images of pain. So yeah, it was a fun experience, fire content, and happy to see what happens in the future.
Was there anyone that you met there that just blew your socks off that you think about?
Oh, Whoopi Goldberg. Yeah, fully. And it was funny because we have social media now, and so it's actually it doesn't seem too crazy when you see someone in person. For me, it was hearing her voice and being like, oh, that's really your voice. And she's like, yes. And but she gave really inspiring words and just talked about, like, you know, we are in a rough business and we are trying to pave new grounds and do new things. And so just to hear that she's proud and like basically saying like, keep going, keep fighting, it just, yeah, it reinvigorates you. That was a fairy godmother moment in real life. Seeing the kids last week was another, you know, so I don't know how much of it is along this journey and how much of it is just post the 1.5 years we've all been through, but
it feels especially, yes.
Yeah. Just to be right and align with what you want to do, and know that this really can be the beginning despite everything that's already happened.
You feel that way, Angie?
Yeah. I have more hope than I would think I'd have at a time like this. And it's because I still see the good. I still see the great things that are happening in our industry and in other industries and entertainment as a whole. When it comes to people like us breaking barriers and doing art and making ourselves heard and seen, that gives me hope. Like seeing Tomi in that dress, I was like, yes, you just gave me some extra life. Yes, you know. So, you know, anytime I see us with joy, that gives me hope. Anytime I see us with joy, it gives me hope. So please hold on to the joy, because you don't recognize, I don't think any of us realize how much our joy can impact someone else.
What advice would both of you have? I know you get this question a lot, but it's one that everyone is hanging on. What advice would you give to a young person who wants to write or is thinking about writing, still trying to figure out what stories they want to tell?
Well, we're like, who's going to speak? Well, my first piece of advice is be okay with being imperfect. Like a lot of times, what keeps people from writing, whether young or not so young, is when they sit down and they write and they're like, oh, this isn't good. I just read this awesome book. This is awful compared to that. Do you recognize how many edits that book went through? Like, books go through a lot of edits. Books never start out the way that they end up. Be okay with being perfect. Write the bad, write the trash, write the garbage. Just write. Get it out there. Editing can come later. Don't hold yourself to a high standard at that time. Just the most important thing you need to do is get the words out. That's it. So be okay with being bad. Write bad. Just write.
Tell me.
Yeah, I would say find that inner world. I think because we are in such a hyper connected age, and there's like Wattpad and like just all these ways to share what you've written, and immediately get validation or really painful feedback. I would say if writing is something you love, protect that shell. Get really good at that shell. Get really good at going into that inner world and just taking whatever's in your mind and putting it on your page. Because if this is something you want to do with your living, it's like a job like anything else. Like there are ways to do it. There's paths to do it. There is a process. That part can come. But if you solidify that inner world that you dive into for that creativity and for that process and for what it does for you, something that you have 24/7 access to right now, that you don't need an agent or an author or a publisher to give you, that's all you need. The other stuff can come, but build that for yourself. I'm so glad I didn't know fan fiction existed. I thought I made up the whole concept because I was just doing it for years alone, and then it was I was 22 and I was like, there's websites for this. So it's, I'm like, keep it in, because I was in my shell for so long, and once you get out in the world, you have to learn how to go back into your shell, both for your peace of mind and to actually do the job. So I would say just focus on that, because you have that, you get good at that, you find the magic in there. The rest is a process, and the rest will come.
Okay, both of you guys have to share with us, what are you listening to and reading right now? You go first, tell me.
Okay, what am I listening to? I know that should be such an easy question. I guess I'm listening to Gentle Rain.
Oh, really?
It really calms me down.
Yeah.
I'm also listening to Peaceful Journeys. I'm in this place where I'm finding sounds because I'm in writing mode. So I'm looking for sounds that don't leave me in silence, that help me feel like I'm in my own world. And going through that, I'm like, what are you listening to music-wise? I was like, I don't even have a good example.
I love it.
For what I am reading, I just finished Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I'm rereading Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I also just read The Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang, the source story for the Arrival movie. And so, yeah, I find when I'm in a period of okay, you really want to flow again, it's getting my literary bug turning, because eventually I'm reading, I'm like, this is so good, and I'm like, oh, I want to write. So I want to read what I want to write, and then you start writing it. So I'm always working with myself when I'm in writing mode, just to get to that good poise. But yeah, listening to Rain and Six of Crows. What about you?
Yeah, what about you, Angie?
Let's see. I've been listening to a lot of Aaliyah lately, because her entire catalog is now out there. And we went for all these years without access to her music. So I've been listening to her self-titled album over and over and over again. So I've been doing that. I've been listening to a lot of Outkast, a lot of Outkast and Goody Mob and stuff like that, as I'm working on this book that I'm working on. Because, when I think of hip hop and futuristic fantasy stuff, I think of Outkast, and Missy Elliott. I've been listening to Missy too. I'm always old school with my stuff. As far as books go, I've been reading a lot of middle grade fantasy books. So I've read the Tristan Strong series, the new one came out today. I read Amari and the Night Brothers, which is an awesome book. And I then on the adult side, I recently started. That was louder than I expected. I recently started reading this. Everybody knows I'm a Tupac fan, so this is an oral history of Tupac. It's called Changes. It's by Sheldon Pierce, and it includes a lot of oral conversations with people who knew him from different parts of his life. And then I was reading in September an oral history of September 11th. All this tragic stuff, I know, but I think it's important that we don't forget. Come here, baby. Sorry, my dog just came in. He wants treats.
Well, it's a perfect way to wrap it up because we all have to see Kobe. I think the audience.
As soon as you said that, he walked out the room.
Because he got what he wanted. You gave him the treat. You got to give him one more so he can come over.
Kobe.
An idea is maybe we can have all of your recommendations in our YouTube. Everyone who's watching and those that you want to share this with, you'll be able to see on our City Space YouTube channel. And we'll have all of your recommendations on what you're listening to and what you're reading down right underneath. Because I want a lot of those too.
I can put the YouTube link for the gentle rate.
Yeah. Right. If you found one like that is longer than a few hours, that can last like 9 hours, you have to.
8 hours. It's great.
Well, Tomi Adeyemi and Angie Thomas, thank you so much for this conversation. It has been great to talk with you about your work, and congratulations on your success.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this conversation.
And everyone who's watching again, you will be able to watch this again on our WBUR City Space YouTube channel. And thank you all for joining us tonight. You all have a good night.